Chapters 1 and 2 saw Solomon acceding to the throne over his rival, and then making it secure with a series of well-justified executions and one banishment. In some of these judgments, Solomon brings down the wrath of God which these individuals had earned during his father's reign. Thus he is careful to settle outstanding debts, as he says in 231, that executing Joab removes the guilt of Abner and Amasa's deaths from his father's house, which now falls on the right person. Chapters 3 and 4 take this initial achievement, which displayed both a concern for justice and subtle cunning, think for example of how he handled Shimei, and now take it to the next level by expanding Solomon's activities from around his throne in Jerusalem to the whole of Israel and indeed beyond. The great things which David achieved, such as conquering all their enemies and giving peace to Israel, extending their borders, capturing Jerusalem and bringing the ark into it, all these prosper in the hands of his son. The borders are extended still further to the greatest there will ever be. The prosperity and reputation of the nation reaches its height. The unity of the tribes which David consolidated is organized by Solomon. And of course, later on, he will construct a house for the Ark of the Lord, a task which was denied David. Verses 1 and 2 set the scene for this next stage of the Israelite monarchy. We saw David grow in his political acumen as he built relationships with the tribes and took various wives. Solomon, however, strides the international stage from the beginning. We are now a long way from slavery in Exodus. The fact that the Pharaoh gave his daughter to Solomon to make an alliance, along with a dowry of some strategic land, indicates that now Israel is the stronger partner. Still, it is surprising that Solomon takes a pagan wife and makes no effort to hide it. His other foreign wives will later cause him grief by leading him into idolatry. Verse 2 also points out another problem. The so-called high places were still being used by the people, indeed even by Solomon. In this way, the stage is set for the struggles which will dominate the kings of Judah and then Israel as well, as they vary in their commitment and ability to address the proliferation of shrines. Solomon, at least, is worshipping the Lord. And that's putting it lightly. Verse 4 records that he burnt 1,000 offerings on that altar at Gibeon, which follows the statement in verse 3 that Solomon loved the Lord and walked in the statutes of his father David. Each future king will likewise receive an assessment of their reign and character. Solomon has what is called an incubation dream, which we encountered near the end of 1 Samuel. This is where a person sleeps in a certain special place, like a temple, or with a special object, in the hope that a god will appear to them. Saul tried to have such dreams, but at that point the Lord was no longer responding to him. But when the Lord speaks to Solomon, we have the only instance of God speaking directly to a king. This experience certainly justifies the name that the Lord gave him through the prophet Nathan. Solomon's response to the Lord's amazing offer is outstanding and proves his worth. Only a wise person would ask for wisdom. As Jesus said, "To whomever has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance." In his reply, Solomon situates himself very humbly within the history of God's dealings with Israel and his father. He acknowledges that God established David, and now Solomon sits on that throne. He now has the responsibility to lead a people God has chosen and who are so numerous they cannot be counted. This recalls the original promises with the blessings of expansion. His request is to be made able to handle this weighty responsibility which has been handed to him. He positions himself as an unworthy servant, indeed a little child. A fantastic example is now given which demonstrates this wisdom in matters of justice. These prostitutes lived together without a husband who would have decided the matter. Thus they must bring it to the king. It was possible to assess cases where there are no witnesses by means either of the oracular stones or an oath before the Lord, as Exodus 22, 7-11 shows. But Solomon is able to bring out the truth directly. The result is that Israel was in awe of Solomon. Indeed, as the chapter will conclude, God so increased Solomon's wisdom that it surpassed even that of Egypt and other notable sources, and that the people and even royalty would travel to Israel to hear it. This will be taken up by the evangelist Matthew when he writes of the Magi coming to visit Jesus, and indeed by Jesus himself later on in that same gospel. Other details are given of Solomon's monarchy. His wisdom extended to the administration of his realm, which included dividing the northern tribes into 12 regions, not based on their actual tribal divisions. This meant the Canaanites still living in the land were included in these regions, on which were imposed taxes and corvée labour. Although there is no negative comment on it here, we can see the court of Solomon swelling enormously, fulfilling Samuel's prediction of the nature of royalty, that what you produce, whether grains, figs, grapes, or sons, will be taken for the king and given to his friends. The burden this created is reflected in the request of the tribes in chapter 12 after Solomon dies, that his successor relieve them of the hard service they had endured. But for now, the emphasis is on the greatness of Solomon and how through him God made Israel powerful and famous.